I decided, or rather my Twitter followers and I decided, that what I would do to give everybody a break from the noise and the craziness and the fear-mongering and the nonsense was read a chapter of my book. And appreciating could do this in audio, but there's something about doing it this way that feels funnier. My book's rude. I'm not trying to flog my book either, because actually it's sold out. But I just thought it would be a way of us having a laugh and not talking about coronavirus or some other rubbish stuff that's going on mainstream. Anyway, I thought I'd read you the last chapter because it seems like the right way to start, with a bit of finishing. And I don't know, I thought it might be helpful. So anyway, chapter 12, last words. And so, my friend, this is where our cosy chat ends. And funnily enough, I don't want it to be over. I dreaded writing this book because I have the tenacity of a dead rabbit and am about as far from a completer finisher as Stephen Hawking is from finishing a London marathon. That's really inappropriate. But actually, I've loved it. Loved spending my time with my own thoughts and sneaking away to write about bits of my life, long filed on a shelf in a box marked past. It's felt a bit like taking your phone into the toilet with you when you go for a wee, like 5 minutes of time to yourself, facing inwards, away from all the things in your life that pull you outward in 1,000 different directions, like your kids who need you to do something, or your husband who needs you to find something, or your boss who needs you to do his bidding, or your mother who needs you to hear that she's cross at the neighbour, or your friend who needs somewhere to park. It's been very much like therapy, awkward at times, like being made to sit in front of a mirror and just stare at yourself and say what you see, which is my idea of a nightmare, but therapeutic all the same. And I know how it is for someone reading all this. You know, I wonder what it's like. I feel embarrassed at the thought, kind of like waking up the morning after the night before and vaguely remembering an incident with a policeman and telling the kebab man he has a small willy. I prefer not to think about actual people reading this book, if any bugger actually does. I'm choosing to imagine that this is our little secret, just you and me, tucked up in the darkest corner of a pub somewhere behind a sticky table. I wonder if you're thinking, thank God that's bloody well over, as you see the end in sight and look forward to heading out the door of the pub, happy to be rid of that bloody whining old cowbag as you hot-foot it onto the night bus home. I wonder if, for you, this whole chat has been like one of those dreadful nights where you agreed to have a drink with someone you were never too sure about in the first place, only to spend the next torturous 3 hours remembering why you were never too sure about them, because they're a desperate, needy, narcissistic, deluded, paranoid, lonely bore and are about as good company as low-level chlamydia, perhaps. Maybe the experience of spending time with me has been like one of those nights where you meet someone you've secretly always found pretty funny or agreed with occasionally and thought it would be a good laugh to share a few wines with, and it turns out we've ended up sharing up a few bottles of Prosecco and 4 G&Ts and are now committed to being bestest friends forever and loving each other even though we only get to see each other once a year. I sort of hope it's the latter, but I'm honestly content if it's not. You can't write about yourself and demand people like the person they see. That's disingenuous from the outset. You can only speak your truth and share it. And if you are prepared to put it out there, then you have to be prepared for people to tell you it's a bag of crap. See Amazon feedback written by my secret Antifa fan club for details. As with so many things in life, you do have a choice. If you don't like being beaten up, you can sit at home on your sofa and shut up instead. And I certainly feel like it's been therapy for my soul, which is a bit of a red flag right there. Therapy is the preserve of my epic Jewish mates and Americans, and I'm neither. Even the word therapy suggests the situation in which you are trapped and bored shitless and wondering how the hell to get out before you fall into a deep vegetative state from which you might never recover. I have overshared, and the ramifications are that this oversharing will now be pulled apart and regurgitated here and there in the press to prove I am whatever grand malevolence I'm supposed to be guilty of this week. I accept this as my punishment. I also accept that I do not control the edit. Others do. You do. My detractors will extract whichever bits of this book they believe confirm the things they already think about me, and they may have a point. Because all of the things in this book, these words, this blah, 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 are my truths. This is the stuff of my life. The mistakes, the warts, brackets, genital and otherwise, the disasters and the triumphs, the lot. I hope that by reading it, some people will have found something helpful for their own lives, or perhaps found we have some things in common, even the things we wildly disagree about, which for many is about 90% of what comes out of my mouth. I hope it will give some of you the courage to believe you are right to have your own views, whatever they are, and that you are brave and beautiful, and what other people say really doesn't matter if you find the strength not to let it. Sometimes we all need help finding that strength and reminding ourselves that real life happens offline. Try to make like an arrow and feel the criticism whoosh past you as you fly ahead. You know, it's okay to read negative stuff about yourself. Being able to watch people write about how your nose is big, or you look like a lesbian, and challenge yourself to read things so dispassionately is a skill. You have to find the strength to step outside and to smell the air and realise that all those people walking down the road don't give a monkeys about what the hell is being said on Twitter or posted on Instagram about you or anyone else. It's all noise, and you have the volume control. You know how if you ask 10 people for feedback and only one person says something bad, that bad review shouts much louder than the 9 really good ones. Life's exactly like that. Get others to help you listen to the 9 voices. Train yourself to hear them. Listen to the 9. Challenge yourself to do something useful with the 10th. Process it. Recognise that someone is probably looking to detract from your strengths and put it in a box marked their issues. Other people need to own their issues. You don't. Don't carry them around or let them drag you down. I hope that some of the people kind enough to buy this thing have found it just a bit interesting, like looking into someone else's shopping trolley to see what size Tampax they take. Or peeking into someone's kitchen window as you walk past. I hope that by looking into bits of my life and some of the stuff that has happened in it, they will see it's okay for us not to take ourselves or our jobs too seriously, and it's absolutely okay to laugh at ourselves a bit more than we do. It's okay for someone in the public eye to admit they're a bit hopeless sometimes, or have done some pretty awful things, to say they stole someone's husband, or thought about taking out a hitman on their first, to admit that not all babies are actually all that cute, and some kids are downright feral, usually the ones called Destiny or Belle. Or that they were secretly okay when their granddad died because the last 6 months were so awful for their mum that they raged at the cruelty of medicine. Or that they wouldn't want a disabled child because they don't feel that they are that good a mum, or openly mock a man for having a micro penis. Maybe all that is just about being honest, and not such a bad thing as long as they aren't forcing their beliefs on anyone else. If my life were a house, I'd make a really crap estate agent. I'd have shown you round without buying fresh flowers, or bothering to make the kitchen look nice, or baking fresh bread, or turning on all the lights so that you think it looks homely. I've shown you the ugly, unattractive bits people normally hide, the damp, smelly bits in the corner, the ongoing row with the neighbours about my bush, or hedge if you prefer. I've shown you my dating disasters, my career nightmares, and the multiple times my big gob has got me into a whole world of pain. I told you about being in trouble with the police and the court system, and how I even had social services call about the welfare of my kids, thanks to my detractors, and how I've waged war against the left, the system, the establishment, anyone to do with HR or compliance, the state broadcaster, and those too certain of their own importance. I've even told you about my epilepsy, the biggest battle of the lot. And you know, I feel pretty good about it all. And about myself, I am just this, nothing more, bad bits and all, and I'm not too proud to show it or pretend to hide it. I am my most powerful me, unashamed, unafraid, and a little bit unhinged by the madness of life. And I'm certain about what matters. I am proud of my children and my husband, and of all the people in my country who love it and want the best for it, and the bits of my country that are great. This brilliant country is filled with people I love being around, who have different views to mine or the same, or who are happy to talk about them, to disagree over a pint and to end as friends, who can find the fun in the simple things of life and take the piss when they're hurting the most. People who would always stop to help you if you needed it, or come and defend your honour if that needed it, or leave a car park ticket in the meter if there is still an hour left on it. People who tell you when you did something well and call you out for being an arsehole just the same, or warn you that you're being a right twat and need to wind your neck in, or that in fact the new hairstyle that you thought was really snazzy in the salon actually looks like a bag of crap on you. These are the people I like to be with and belong to. These are my kind of Brits. It's not all pretty and polite. We all have a crap boiler, or a sister that pisses us off, or a kid that's too spoiled, or a dog that's too fat. We all have stuff that we try and hide to pretend to the world we've got our lives in order, or to pretend to ourselves so that our day goes okay. We don't all feel strong all the time. Sometimes we have to pretend while the rest of us catches up. I have spent many days doing just that. There are the weaknesses that allow us to get along with each other, even as we pretend we've got our shit together so that someone will employ us, or love us, or give us a mortgage, or lend us money. It's the weaknesses we share that make us stronger together. Which is why London and the Liberals have got it so wrong. They've created an environment in which another devastating kind of pretending has become law, in which not only must we never say certain things aloud, we must pretend we don't even think them. They tell us which thoughts are permissible and can be spoken, and which ones we must hide. It's now racist to observe how Asians love to stand in the doorway of the tube whilst they work out where they're going, oblivious to the 40 people behind them who just want to get to work. It's Islamophobic to say that Muslims aren't really that creative when it comes to naming their children, despite the fact that if I stand in a playground in Leicester and shout Mohammed, 4,562 children will come running. It's now sexist to say that women and men are not equal and should not all be paid the same, that no two people are equal and no two people put the same effort into the same job or achieve the same outcome, and that gender usually isn't the differentiator. It's officially fattist to say that it's not healthy to shove half the fridge in your face, become morbidly obese, and then think it's okay for the taxpayer to pay for your new hip you now need or for your type 2 diabetes treatment. It's misogynistic to say that anything other than women are awesome and their vaginas are made of steel, as if that were enough. It's fascist to say that Trump was democratically elected as the 45th president, or that Brexiteers won with 52% of the vote. It's racist to say that Caster Semenya should not be allowed to compete in the female 800-metre race because she has internal testes and hormone levels 3 times that of a normal female. It's homophobic to say that I, as much as I love gay pride, I cannot abide the way that even these tolerant processions, certain individuals are excluded. For example, the 2017 march at which the Israeli pride flag, it was deemed offensive, and those marching with it were asked to remove themselves from the event. It's transphobic to say I agree entirely with Donald Trump that trans individuals should not serve in the military. I'm delighted you are trans. I couldn't be happier for you. But the idea that this is something we need in our military when there are other individuals who will not need the same levels of cost to recruit or retain is simple economics, and that argument wins every time. The Crown Prosecution Service just issued new guidance as to what constitutes hate. Now it's enough that if you perceive someone to deserve the label, then they have the label, even if you have no proof. This is madness, perceptions and hurty feelings, smoke and mirrors. And guidance like this makes things worse, not better. The more we break down into different identity groups, the more labels there are, and I've been called them all. They're a lazy thing, flung out carelessly in the hope that at least one will stick, activating any group with sufficient power to lobby to have you fired or arrested. So if you identify as black, you've got racist in your armoury to fling at anyone who crosses you. If you identify as Muslim, you've got racist and Islamophobe. If you're a black Muslim lesbian, you've got racist, Islamophobe and homophobe. The one with the most identities gets the most weapons in their personal arsenal. It's like a weird game of top trumps for victims. And when people start to conflate their politics with their identity, then things get really personal. If, for example, you are a Remainer and I criticise Remain, I am perceived to be criticising you personally. And that's exactly what we saw over Brexit. Lots of close friends and kitchen supper mates fell out over Brexit. If one voted Remain and one voted Brexit, they could no longer be friends, not even on Facebook. And this was not teenage kids. This went on amongst fully grown adults, unable to remain friends with people they'd loved for years because their identity and their politics were confused as being one and the same thing. Even the Johnson family fell out. Boris was Brexit. His sister, Rachel, sat on the beach in Cannes on the 24th of June and wept because she was Remain. Later, she became a temporary Liberal Democrat in protest. Some things get taken way too far. If I try to silence your opinion, I'm no longer simply criticising your politics. Identity politics means I'm now criticising you personally. If I speak out with my belief that Black Lives Matter is a nonsense organisation that needs to stop what it's doing because it fuels civil unrest, an opinion supported by the niece of Martin Luther King, whom I met in a hotel lobby, then now I'm not criticising your politics, I'm criticising you as a black woman, giving you the legitimacy to label me as a racist, despite the fact I'm not one, that we might agree on lots of other issues and that we might even have been friends. In this climate, any attack on the things you believe is an attack on your very humanity, which explains why men are so isolated from the feminist debate. Appearing to attack womankind is dangerous. I, on the other hand, can say what I like about women. I may be called misogynist, I frequently am, but I won't be prosecuted for it because I am a woman. That's why I carefully referenced Martin Luther King's niece above. I need the voice of a black woman to say that Black Lives Matter needs to stop, because if I say it as a white woman, I will be labelled racist. Plus, it's hard to argue with the niece of Martin Luther King. It's also why I invited the beautiful Mohan Singh onto my former radio show to talk about Muslim grooming gangs. Mohan is a Sikh. I've already referenced my undying love for Sikhs. If I talk about Muslim grooming gangs or majority Pakistani Muslim grooming gangs, I can only reach the people who probably already agree with my views or occasionally agree. I cannot reach the people who reject my views and anything I do or say outright just because it's me. Perhaps because they can't see past the labels, Islamophobe, racist, Brexiteer, xenophobe, whatever. And I accept that. But if Mohan Singh talks about grooming gangs, whatever his views, he starts to reach the people who won't listen to me but might listen to him even if they disagree. That's the beauty of having multiple voices. And it's something our media should be doing a great deal more of, using lots of different voices to reach great deal more people, to get messages out there, to draw people into the conversation, even if it's to disagree. Too often these days, programmes are made with compelling contributors to force a point of consensus or to air a specific viewpoint approved by the programme editor. The result is that whole swathes of England go unspoken for, hundreds and thousands without a voice, largely because of those who play identity politics and throw labels about. Hillary Clinton's campaign was based entirely on this same identity politics and the idea of intersectionality, the ways in which oppressive institutions, racist, sexist, homophobic, ableist, xenophobic, classist, are interconnected and cannot be examined separately from one another. Hillary Clinton campaigned at the apex of intersectionality. She campaigned for every different group on the basis that the thing that mattered most to them was their identity. She campaigned for women, for Hispanics, for gays, for black women, for black lesbian women, and for the disabled. Basically, if you saw yourself as a minority or, in my terms, a victim, then you voted for Hillary. And of course, it turned out to be not enough. Identity politics is not enough. It's never enough. It speaks only to how you see yourself. It does not speak to how you see the future direction of the country. What Hillary Clinton had in terms of politically correct soundbites about gender and race, she lacked in actual policies or concrete things she was committed to making happen, and that's why she lost. Even her running mate was selected because of his Hispanic credentials. The crowd went wild on the campaign when he spoke to them in Spanish, as if speaking Spanish were by itself enough. Clinton may have gained some support through her identity politics, but she lost because of her identity politics too. Ultimately, it was limiting, and I think that's reassuring at a time when everyone is competing to be the biggest victim. The argument for action and clear policy is still greater and can be heard more clearly. I see it today, and it leads me to my own future and what's next for Katie Hopkins. And I have to say, there's never been a master plan. I've never been that calculating or clear about where I was headed. I just followed my gut and wrote stuff, and sometimes got paid to keep writing the stuff I wanted to write. But things are changing and have changed. I can see how the media has shifted into a deeply paranoid space where the cost of doing business in every sense is much greater than before. There is real money and power sitting with campaign and lobbying groups who have strong links to politics and power and the support of identity groups. Take the Muslim Council for Britain, for example, or the Board of Deputies of British Jews. Add Hope Not Hate, which is very well funded, and you have the triumvirate of lobbying power. These guys can pull in the chief rabbi or the head imam to make their point, and they lobby editors incessantly to get their views heard most loudly across Britain. They work tactically. They pick out sponsors, haul them out in the press, encourage their supporters to target the sponsors and work as a mob defined by identity, sent forth by the heads of the identity they are loyal to try to sever commercial ties between advertisers and the media platform they espouse. Then you have the power players like Clooney or Murdoch Jr. and Gates, who donate millions to those who seek to silence opinions from the right or supporters of Trump. Place all that in a climate of paranoia and fear, and it quickly becomes apparent this is not a good time to be a journalist fighting for the right. It's a time in which labels are incendiary and entire legions of lawyers and litigators exist to pounce on the smallest perceived misdemeanours, not to mention the appetite of the CPS and police for a conservative scalp. The Sun ran an article about Muslim grooming gangs, referring to the Muslim problem in capital letters. It lost an MP her position on the front bench, even though she had nothing to do with the article that caused the perceived offence. It nearly cost Mr. Kavanagh his job at the Sun, and he's worked there for 20 years. Before that, it was Kelvin Mackenzie. Admittedly, I thought he was a prize pillock, and so did most of the News UK building by all accounts, but that's neither here nor there. Through no direct fault of his own, he ended up agreeing to leave over a column because the aforementioned powerful lobbying groups managed to force him out. I can't even tell you some of the things Mail Online has had to pay to correct or compensate for on my behalf, but you'd fall off your chair. It's enough to make you spit. And lawyers have no qualms about which ambulance they have to chase, even if it involves compensation for a terrorist set out to harm people or our way of life. It's a moment like this that have made me want to give it all up. It's a dirty business. Moments like being criticised by Ofcom for being too pro-Israeli on my radio show, but then being fired from the same radio show for tweeting something perceived as anti-Jewish, despite the fact that I was referencing an Islamist terror attack, or being hounded for saying something on Twitter that someone deemed offensive, or having a selfie taken in a Sicilian street with some random bloke who happened to be linked to Holocaust denial. What do people expect? That I ask for a CV from everybody who asked me to have a selfie with them? There's no rationalising with these people. I see that the world is changing. I see that the ability to speak out is being lost, and that the platform from which to speak has shrunk down to its smallest size yet, and the direction of travel is still towards an ever-increasingly identity-bound form of politics. It's a great pity and a great shame. Sometimes I feel like a polar bear on a little island of ice, where a whole polar bear ice cap used to be, watching the land under my feet melt away. The old industry has changed. The media is controlled by those who think like Clinton, and socialism rules. It'll not be like this forever. Politics and market forces come in phases. This is a phase, but it is a phase I will not enjoy very much in my present form or position. I don't want to keep trying to speak when the doors and the windows are repeatedly slammed against me. Eventually my tongue will get caught. We need new ways, new platforms, new opportunities to speak out more freely and to keep standing up for people in this country who feel like they've lost their voice. And I'm committed to doing that because it is what I know and it is what I believe in doing. Also, because there's too many people out there who feel utterly dejected at the state of the country and of a capital city that increasingly looks and sounds like a foreign country. And I don't mean anything to do with colour or background. I mean foreign in its true sense, as in a place where the natives have become outsiders, a place where our own customs, rituals, language or behaviours take second place, a place where we no longer feel like home. I feel responsible for standing up against all that. I'd feel disloyal if I just shut up shop and left it all behind for the good life, even though that's a temptation that pulls me hard. There's a massive part of me that could quite happily stop all this, sit in my garden and dig things about for a bit. Maybe get the rescue chickens I've wanted for ages and a pig. That's where my heart is set. That's my plan for a little later in my life. But right now, voices are needed more than ever before. This is no time to quit. It is the time to find a way to keep speaking, to move to self-funded filming and documentary work that bypasses commissioners and TV consoles.
We will make America great again.